In Iran's recent local elections, reformers push hard for a shift to proportional representation. And I mean, on paper, it makes perfect sense, right?
Absolutely. Mathematically, it's designed to do exactly what they wanted.
Right. It's the system that's supposed to increase diversity, capture minority voices, and basically break up political monopolies. But instead of empowering the reformists, this highly inclusive math actually handed a near total victory to the most hardline conservatives.
Yeah, it completely backfired.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're exploring why electoral math behaves less like a predictable science and, well, a lot more like a loaded weapon.
It really is. I mean, it's the ultimate invisible engine of statecraft. We always tend to focus on, the charisma of the politicians or the general mood of the electorate, but it's those underlying rules of the game that actually dictate everything else.
Exactly. And to crack open that hidden code today, we have this massive stack of sources to guide us. We are looking at the International Idea Handbook on Electoral System Design, this really detailed IFES report called Duality by Design, the Iranian Electoral System, and a bunch of academic papers on democratic transitions.
It's a lot of material, but it's essential for the mission of this deep dive. We need to explore these theoretical foundations and major models of electoral systems and then apply all that to a really complex case study, which is the democratic transitions in Iran.
Right. And before we jump in, we need to put a very clear disclaimer on this. Because we are pulling from sources that touch on a highly charged political environment, left-wing, right-wing, conservative, reformist factions in the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Right.
We just want to say up front that we're taking no political sides here.
Right, not all.
We're just your impartial guides today. We're reporting exactly what the source texts say. We aren't endorsing any specific political viewpoint or movement.
Precisely. We're studying the physics of political power here, not picking a team.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because while electoral engineering sounds like this really dry, abstract math, it literally determines whether a society thrives in peace or just collapses into conflict. So, let's start with the basics.
Yeah, let's strip away the campaign rallies and the debates.
Right. At its core, an electoral system isn't just about counting votes. It boils down to three moving parts. You've got district magnitude, which is how many representatives there are per district.
Just huge, yeah.
Then the electoral formula, the actual math that converts votes into seats. And finally, the ballot structure, right? Like how voters actually express their choice on the paper.
Exactly. Checking a box versus ranking candidates, for example. And these aren't just lines on a map. They interact to manage the most foundational tension in any democratic design, which is proportionality versus governability.
Right.
So proportionality is this drive to make the legislature a perfect mirror of the voters. If a highly specific, fringe faction gets 8% of the vote, proportionality says they get 8% of the seats. It guarantees inclusivity.
But then governability is the total opposite. It's the drive to ensure a stable government can actually form and, pass laws.
Yeah, to actually get things done without endless gridlock.
It's like ordering pizza for a large group. I always use this analogy. Proportionality is letting everyone order their own highly specific, bizarre slice.
Oh, I like that.
Right. Like, it's fair, sure, but it's a complete logistical nightmare.
The delivery would take hours.
Exactly. Whereas governability is just ordering 3 large pepperonis. Some people might be annoyed or feel left out, but hey, everyone eats quickly and the party moves on.
That captures the trade-off perfectly. But, what's fascinating here is that these systems aren't just reflecting what voters want. They're actually incentive structures.
What do you mean by that?
Well, they dictate how politicians behave. Do they need to build broad coalitions to win, or do they just fight zero-sum battles? Do campaigns focus on party ideology or just the individual personalities?
Oh, I see. But wait, don't these rules ultimately just force voters and politicians to behave in certain ways? Like, doesn't it force voters to sometimes vote strategically for the lesser of two evils instead of who they actually want?
Yes. That is exactly what they do. The math dictates the strategy. If you know how the system counts the votes, you change how you vote.
Which brings us to the menu of models, right? How the world actually votes. Knowing that these systems basically engineer behavior, let's look at the options.
Let's do it.
So first up is the majoritarian family. This includes first past the post, or FPTP, which we see in the US and the UK. It's winner take all.
Right. Whoever gets the most votes wins, even if it's not a majority.
Exactly. And then you have the two-round system, or TRS, which is used in France and, as we'll see later, in Iran.
Yeah, with TRS, a candidate usually needs an absolute majority. And if no one gets it, The top candidates face off in a runoff election.
So that heavily favors governability, but contrast that with proportional representation, or PR systems.
Right. So a great example from the sources is the list PR system used in South Africa. The entire country essentially acts as one massive district.
Oh, wow. So how does that pan out in an actual election?
Well, the text highlights their 2014 election. 29 different parties ran.
29. That's incredible.
Yeah, and 13 of them actually won seats in the 400-member assembly.
Yeah.
So it's wildly inclusive.
But there is a well-documented psychological effect to all this, right?
Right.
Which brings us to Duverger's law?
Ah, yes. Duverger's law. It's basically the gravity of political science. It's this long-standing finding that majoritarian systems naturally tend to create two-party systems.
Because voters don't want to waste their vote on a third party that can't win.
Exactly. And conversely, PR systems almost always produce multi-party environments, like we just saw with South Africa.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, though, because countries don't always want to choose between the two.
Right. They want the best of both worlds.
Exactly. They want that local geographic representation where you know your specific MP, but they also want proportional national balancing, and that leads to mixed systems.
Like mixed member proportional, or
Yeah.
MMP.
Yeah, MMP. It's like you get a local representative, but the overall makeup of the parliament is still mathematically corrected to match the national vote.
It's an elegant solution.
Yeah.
But, all these models assume a free market of politics, right? They assume candidates can just run and voters can just vote.
Which brings us to our case study. What happens to all this math when an authoritarian regime puts a heavy thumb on the scale?
Yeah, let's apply this lens directly to the Iranian electoral landscape.
Because to understand Iran, we have to look at a century of voting history from the texts. They didn't just discover elections yesterday. They have a really rich electoral history going all the way back to the 1906 constitutional revolution.
Right, and women actually gained the franchise there in 1963.
But the current architecture is what the IFES report calls duality by design. It's this tandem construct.
Yeah, the 1979 Constitution essentially jams two fundamentally opposing ideas together. On one side, you have popular sovereignty, so democracy.
Right.
But on the other side, you have velayat-e faqih, which is the rule of the Islamic jurisconsult, meaning theocracy.
So how does that duality actually work in practice? I mean, who runs the elections?
Well, there's a split. The administration of the elections is handled by the Ministry of Interior.
Okay.
They handle the logistics for the 290-seat unicameral majlis, which is the parliament, and the presidency. And they use that two-round system we mentioned earlier.
So the Ministry of Interior does the administration, but who does the supervision?
That would be the Guardian Council.
Right, the Guardian Council. And they are composed of 6 Islamic jurists and 6 lawyers, correct?
Exactly. But their version of supervision is really a vetting bottleneck. And this is a staggering statistic from the sources.
Let's hear it.
The Guardian Council uses these really vague eligibility criteria to vet candidates. In the past 9 presidential elections, they have disqualified over 90% of the hopefuls.
Over 90%. That is a massive purge before anyone even casts a ballot.
Yeah. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it's fascinating how they justify it. Back in 1906, there was this basic litmus test to ensure candidates had insight into the affairs of the state.
Which makes sense for 1906. You just want basic competency.
Right. But today, that century-old competency test has been transformed into a tool for massive political exclusion. It's now a test of absolute ideological loyalty.
But wait, this brings up a huge question. If the system is this heavily restricted, and everyone knows the Guardian Council just blocks almost everyone, why do political factions even bother participating?
That's a great question.
I mean, why not just boycott the whole thing and refuse to play their game?
Well, the source material calls this the Democrats' dilemma. It's a trap.
Yeah.
Because, yes, participating in rigged elections can legitimize the regime.
Right. The regime gets to point to the turnout and say, look, we're a democracy.
Exactly. But on the flip side, boycotting leaves the opposition forces without any organizational platform.
So they lose their ability to organize.
Yeah. Participating, even when it's rigged, serves as a learning path. It allows civil society to practice mobilization, hone their messaging, and keep their networks alive.
So it's either give the regime some legitimacy or completely dismantle your own political infrastructure. That is a brutal dilemma.
It really is.
And this brings us to the future. With the current system alienating voters, especially the moderate gray voters who historically tip elections in Iran, we need to shift to the theoretical. If a democratic transition actually occurs, how on earth do you re-engineer this broken system?
Well, documents like the Iran Prosperity Project outline a transitional framework for exactly this.
And what does that framework look like?
It involves a national referendum first,
Mhm.
basically letting the people choose between a parliamentary monarchy and a republic, and then that's followed by a constituent assembly to actually draft the rules.
Right. But picking the right electoral model is dangerous. And the sources share this really surprising detail about the recent local elections in Tehran that perfectly illustrates the danger.
Oh, the Tehran City Council elections.
Yeah. So the reformers wanted a proportional representation model, thinking it would give them a voice. But shifting to PR actually benefited the conservative and hardline faction.
Which completely shocks the reformers.
Because the disillusioned gray voters,
Yeah.
the moderates, they just stayed home out of frustration. So overall turnout dropped.
Right.
And because the conservative bases are highly disciplined and highly organized, they showed up. And in a proportional list system with low turnout, that disciplined minority just dominated the whole thing.
It's a textbook example of why context matters. You can't just copy and paste an electoral formula and expect the same results.
So when we look at designing a new system for a post-transition Iran, what are the specific recommendations from the experts?
They largely point to two options. Option A is the mixed member proportional system, or MMP, which we touched on earlier.
And why is MMP highly recommended for Iran specifically?
Because Iran has incredibly deep regional and ethnic identities. MMP provides that local district representation, which is crucial for provincial accountability. People need a local champion.
Right.
But it also ensures national proportionality.
Right.
So it prevents minority alienation on a national scale. It balances the map.
Okay, so that's option A. But there's also option B, which is the single transferable vote, or STV. How does that one work?
So STV is fascinating. It's often considered for new democracies that have really weak or heavily distrusted political parties.
Which would definitely be the case after a transition.
Exactly. Instead of voting for a party list, STV allows voters to actually rank individual candidates. You literally put a 1, a 2, a 3 next to the names.
So it's based on personal integrity rather than just party labels.
Right. If your first choice gets eliminated, or if they win with a massive surplus of votes, your vote just transfers to your second choice. There are no wasted votes.
So what does this all mean? We can talk about the math of MMP or the ranking of STV all day long, but the ultimate conclusion from the sources, pretty stark.
Very stark, yeah.
None of this electoral math matters at all unless the Guardian Council's arbitrary vetting is completely abolished.
That is the absolute prerequisite. You can have the most beautifully designed MMP system in the world, but if a council is disqualifying 90% of the candidates before the election even starts...
It's just rigged math.
Exactly. The vetting has to be replaced by an independent electoral management body. Without that, the rest is just window dressing.
Right. So to kind of wrap up this deep dive, an electoral system really is the invisible engine of a nation.
It really is.
Whether it's the UK's first past the post or Iran's heavily vetted two-round system, these invisible rules completely dictate who holds power and whether minorities actually have a voice.
And for a country like Iran, designing a new system that balances local accountability with proportional inclusion is the ultimate key to a stable democratic transition.
But this raises an important question, right?
Yeah, and it's a warning straight from the Netherlands Institute for Multi-Party Democracy source.
Let's hear it.
Electoral engineering is highly unpredictable. Think about what happens when a political party designs a brand new electoral system specifically to guarantee their own success in a new, open society.
Right. They try to rig the math in their favor.
Exactly. They run the numbers, they set the rules, but then they find out that the new rules completely change how the voters behave.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The voters adapt to the new incentives, and it ends up handing the victory directly to their rivals instead.
Because you can out-engineer the math, but you can't out-engineer human nature.
Exactly.
What a thought to leave off on. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. And the next time you cast a ballot or watch an election unfold, we hope you look past the politicians and start looking for the invisible rules that shape the world around you.